in the UK. There's hundreds of thousands of people in the streets protesting the mandatory digital ID that is starting on January 1st. But Americans are not protesting in the street because they don't even realize what they have in their pocket. They think that digital ID is a good thing. They don't understand it pings the government every time they take it out and use it. And they don't understand what it could become, that it could link them to a global identification system.
You know how the Real ID is there to make sure that the establishment has control over you and can shut down your life at the snap of a fingers? Well, guess what? Rand Paul's doing something about it. Chairman Rand Paul introduces the Safeguarding Personal Information Act of 2025. Real ID is effectively creating a national ID card with no limit on the personal information being shared between all 50 states, the District of Columbia possessions, and territories, said Chairman Rand Paul. My bill repeals this dangerous mandate and restores the privacy, due process, and First Amendment rights stripped away in 2005. The government should not have a dossier on every American. You should never have to show your papers to travel freely within your own country or enter a building your tax dollars paid for. And this is it. So this organization, CCHF, that is which stands for the Citizens Council for Health Freedom, applauds U.S. Senator Rand Paul's bill to repeal the Real ID. So this is important. So Citizens Council for Health Freedom, which is leading the charge nationwide against the federal Real ID system, commends U.S. Senator Rand Paul, chair of the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, for introducing the Safeguarding Personal Information Act of 2025, a bill to repeal the Real ID Act of 2005, introduced on September 11th, the anniversary of the very event that led to the creation of Real ID. Senator Paul's bill takes aim at the system of surveillance being built in the name of national security. Senator Paul is standing up for state sovereignty and for every American's right to privacy and personal autonomy, said Twila Brase, RN and PHN, president and co-founder of CCHF. Let's bring her in. She's with us right here. Twila is a registered and certified public health nurse who co-founded the Citizens Council for Health Freedom, a national organization based in St. Paul, Minnesota, that advocates for healthcare choices, individualized patient care, and medical and genetic privacy. She's widely recognized for her Health Freedom Minute, which is her radio feature heard on over 780 radio stations nationwide, and for her book, Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records. Please welcome back to the show, Twila Brase. Hi, Twila. How are you?
Brase.
Twila Brase?
Hi.
I'm sorry, did I mispronounce your last name? My apologies.
No worries, but it's true. It's Brase. But hi, so glad to be back.
So you went on to say that state DMVs have been hijacked. Real ID is a federal identification card and a national surveillance system masquerading as a state driver's license. So go ahead, remind people what you mean by that.
Yeah. So, when people pull out their ID and they're looking at it and they see a star, or they get it, they get their new one, they see a star, they just think it's a state driver's license with a star and think that star is pretty cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people say, well, it's a real ID. Right. I want a real ID because why would I want a fake ID? But the fact of the matter is this is a federal ID. It's a federal ID under federal control for a country that says that states are in charge of everything except what the federal government is limited to. But this is a federal ID for federal control that I believe that it will expand far beyond flight.
And so Rand Paul is trying to step up. What do you think the chances are of this bill passing?
So I think there's several ways to look at that. So he is chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. And by being chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, what that means is that he's essentially in charge of the funding for the TSA for Homeland Security, which is pushing the Real ID. So he's in a really powerful position to make something happen. Now, when it comes to having it pass, that would require, of course, that you would get a House author, and it would have hearings and all of that. That may or may not happen, although I'm guessing that, and we are going to ask for, through a coalition letter, we are going to ask him to hold a very public hearing on the Real ID so that the truth about the Real ID comes out. You know, that in England, they're protesting in the street. They got signs, they've got everything, because their leader says, if you don't have a digital ID, you won't be able to work. Well, that's exactly what we're moving toward here, but nobody realizes it. Nobody even knows they have a federal ID in their pocket.
I also did not realize that your state driver's license, yeah, of course, if it's what quote unquote real ID, it's a federal ID. And isn't America haven't we always been opposed to this kind of stuff? You have to have a federal ID and you have to show your papers when you travel?
Yeah, so America has always been opposed to a national ID, but we are calling it a federal ID, even though it is a national ID. We're calling that so that people understand it's the federal government that's in control of it. And actually, we had somebody contact us and talk about their story from the DMV, and they went and they to make the switch back to a standard state driver's license. And the DMV agent said, well, I don't want to be nosy, but I'm kind of curious why you're making this switch. And this woman demurred and said something really nominal. And the DMV agent looked at her and said, is it that you don't want the federal ID? So the DMV agents understand this is a federal ID under federal control. It's a national ID for the entire nation. But what it isn't is a state driver's license. And what it isn't is under state control. And so I will say that when the Real ID passed in 2005 and the first rule came out in 2007, I think is when the proposed rule came out, but then they finalized it in 2008. And when that happened, a bunch of legislators in the states suddenly realized what had happened. And I think there were 14 states that passed laws completely prohibiting any conformance with the Federal Real ID Act. And then there were another handful of states that passed resolutions objecting to it. And so there it stayed for about 9 years until Obama, from the rooftops said that in 2016, you won't be able to fly without the Real ID. The national media picked it up, said it all over the place, scared the American public, who then started to call their state legislators and say, fix this. I need to fly. I've got grandchildren to see, vacations to take, right? But this cast and crew of legislators, for the most part, did not stand up for the states' rights and for the individual privacy rights like they did back in 2007 to 2009.
And you're saying people can refuse the Real ID card. Let me just read if you can't see it. It says Real ID is an unconstitutional national ID that will end state and personal sovereignty. U.S. Senator Rand Paul has introduced the Safeguarding Personal Information Act to fully repeal Title II of the Real ID Act. Contact your U.S. representative and U.S. senator and ask them to support this bill. So that's a good idea. Here's the Repeal Real ID, Stop the Fed ID System, Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Take action now. So is this at your website?
Yeah, so when you go to refuserealid.org, which is our special website for this issue, refuserealid.org, then you will find a link to take action now, and it will take you right to what you're looking at. But there's another thing that will be on there as well, and that is a map, and it has states in different versions of the color red. And that's because the more people that refuse in a state and they switch back to their regular standard driver's license, and then they register with us, the redder the state gets. So I believe, I haven't looked at it today, but yesterday I think there were 49 people. We just put it out a few days ago. We haven't really done a lot to advertise it, but we know that for about the last year, since we have been asking people to switch back, a lot of people are switching back. As a matter of fact, we just heard from someone in Iowa who said that he went and the DMV agent said to him, I don't think I can do that. And then had to go back to the manager, and the manager said, yeah, you can. And so then it was a quick switch, and That agent said, nobody has ever asked me to do that. But see, that's what all Americans need to do. They need to get themselves out of the real ID.
And when people want to fly, what do they do if they want to take a plane flight? Because you need an ID, right?
Well, yes and no. Until the Real ID Act, there was never any kind of law that required you to have a real ID for flight, and people don't know that. But now we do have this one which says that you need a real ID, but they aren't even following that law per se, because the TSA gives you 16 different IDs to use to fly. And of course, your passport and passport card, where you can fly around the world, is clearly a way to do that, but they have other IDs as well. So there's a real ID plus 15 other IDs that you can fly. But now just imagine you're somewhere, Florida, wherever, and you lose your real ID or someone steals it and you want to go back to your home state of Washington. Well, you go to the airport, you tell them you don't have your ID, it was stolen, it was lost, it was this, it was that, right? And then they have a process to let you fly. And I don't know if you have had this happen to you, but I did. I lost my ID before I took my first flight. I lost it right there in the airport. They took me to a little table and they sat me down and they had a phone on the top of the table. And they picked it up and they started asking questions. So, what was your first email address? What was the color of your first car? What was your first address where you lived? I mean, they just had this litany of questions. And if you forgot one of them because it was so long ago, they just moved on to the next question. And after you answered enough questions, they looked at your luggage with a little bit more care, and then they let you on the flight. That's what they did to me.
So I just use my passport when I fly.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a quote unquote real ID. And when I go in to get my license renewed, I can request that it's not a real ID.
Yes, but I would encourage your listeners and your viewers to go in now. Do not wait. I think that the DMV agents are going rogue in some of these states where they are refusing to let the people go back to the standard state driver's license. Because even according to the Department of Homeland Security, there are only 5 states that force you to have a real ID. Like Indiana isn't one of them, but people in Indiana are having a hard time switching back. And in California, which allows you to switch, somebody told us it was easy peasy. It just took about 2 minutes to go there and pay their $30 extra and switch back. So it really kind of depends on the state, but I think in a lot of states, the DMV agents just want to put you in a real ID, and maybe they will try to do that more strongly now that we have started to try to get people to switch back, because I'm sure they're talking to each other. They're reporting to the Department of Homeland Security every month the number of people who have real IDs and the number of people who have state driver's licenses. So as we, turn this around and have the trajectory go in the other direction, they're going to notice that. So do not wait to go get your to make the switch. Don't wait till your renewal. Just go and do it now.
And even truckers. So there, you see this QR code? Truckers are putting it on the back of their trucks. And if you scan that QR code, it takes you, where does that take you?
It takes you to the refuserealid.org website.
Okay, fantastic.
So this trucker is going all across the country with this message of refusing the real ID. And so, yeah, it's very special to have him doing this. We'd love other truckers to do it as well.
And so just to remind people, like, the horrors of what a real ID really means, it's a way of tracking you. It's a way of controlling you. It's like, see what happened especially if you get out of line, like what happened with the truckers in Canada during COVID, right?
Right, exactly right, because they shut down their bank accounts. And so, the real ID, here's the gist of it. And if you go to refuserealid.org, we have one page that says Real ID 6 Facts. And it's really the things that we have found that cause people to sort of like wake up and open their eyes to what this thing is. And the first one is that the law says that it can expand its restricted access far beyond flight. So I know that the last time that we talked, you had even put up the law there where it says, access to federal facilities, nuclear facilities, commercial airlines, and any other purposes that the secretary shall choose. So we believe that that will include healthcare, buying a gun, buying ammunition, maybe going to college. It depends on how far they want to turn the screws, as it were, into deciding what you can and cannot do. And of course, this is completely unconstitutional. And this is the federal government being able to control all the activities of your life. And then the DMVs have said that they are digitizing it, putting it on our phones, and then having remote access to it. And they expect that they will eventually have 100% of us in a digital ID. So this is when I say, in the UK, there's hundreds of thousands of people in the streets protesting the mandatory digital ID that is starting on January 1st. But Americans are not protesting in the street because they don't even realize what they have in their pocket. They think that digital ID is a good thing. They don't understand it pings the government every time they take it out and use it. And they don't understand what it could become, that it could link them to a global identification system, that it could become the controversial vax passport, and that it requires a biometric. So this is another really important thing to understand. And I'm going to tie what happens at the airport in with this particular comment. So the Real ID rule requires a biometric starting with your face, which means a digital photograph, which means they have certain data points of your face. They don't even need the photograph of your face anymore. They just need the data points. And so they require a biometric, your face, your facial geometry, and that's the first one. But they said that they could increase the biometrics. Now, in Colorado and Oklahoma, they've already added a thumbprint to their Real IDs. And so what this means is the government has made a claim. They've said that they can collect and catalog the coordinates of your body, put them in a database, and use them to control you. And in short, they are building a facial recognition system in this country through the Real ID, and they'll be able to identify you wherever you are. And this is just like China. Remember where all the cameras, and during COVID, they knew where they were down to 2 feet of space, if I recall correctly. And so people just think this is handy. They don't realize what is going on here. But just imagine, so we got the Trump administration now, and Kristi Noem is pushing people into this system, within the Trump administration, right? But now, what if we had a Gavin Newsom as a president? What if we had a Gavin Newsom administration? And they decided that you should be in a 15-minute city, and they're going to know every time you leave that 15-minute city, and they're going to create a social credit system and a carbon credit system, a way to find out how much carbon use you're doing within that 15-minute city, and every time that you leave, how much do you spend when you go out of it? So, people just have to think about what is actually being built here. Don't look at convenience. I just think it's an amazing scheme to deceive everybody in this country by forcing the DMVs to issue what looks like a state driver's license and not let the people understand that this is really a federal ID that's going to be digitized, controlled by biometrics, and is setting up the framework for a social credit and carbon credit system.
Yeah, I would say 99% of the people don't realize what's happening. So tell people that website they should go to again.
They should go to refuserealid.org, refuserealid.org. And if you have a moment, I should tack on what I said I was going to say about the airports. Do we have that much time?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so when you go into the airport, you just watch people when they get up to the TSA agent, and there's this camera, and the TSA agent will take your ID and say, look there, look into that camera, right? And you don't have to look into that camera. And that camera, I believe, is teaching the computer to look at your ID and see, okay, well, that's what she or he looked like when they had that picture taken, that digital picture taken. Now, this is the person standing in front of me now. I believe it's teaching the machines how to recognize you with a different haircut, with a turtleneck up to the top, with glasses on, no glasses on, makeup, whatever it is that you have different. Teaching the computers how to do that. You do not have to look into that camera, and I'm just going to give you some advice. And they're going to tell you a lie if you miss this advice of mine. So it says as you're going up to the TSA agent, it says you can opt out, you can opt out, you can opt out. And sometimes there's even a little sign above the camera, you can opt out. And most people are just not reading. They're just not reading. And the other people just don't even care. They're like, well, okay, it's just a camera kind of thing, right? But the thing is, if you hand them your ID and then you say, I want to opt out, and they have already put it into the slot, then they will say that, I'm sorry, you have to stand in front of that camera. Now, this just happened to me, and I did not budge. I'm like, I handed the boarding pass and my ID because I knew I wasn't going to stand in front of that camera, and I knew they were going to require the boarding pass. So they took both, put it into the machine, said, stand in front of the camera. As I was saying, I'm opting out. He said, you can't opt out. You're not allowed to opt out once I put that card in the machine. I said, nope, I'm opting out. He said, you're not allowed to. I said, I'm not going to stand in front of that camera. And he said, okay, well, you need to you can't ever refuse again if you have handed me your ID first. But the fact of the matter is that's not true. I got through, and I've gotten through other times, but it really depends on the agent, what they tell you. But to avoid all of that, first thing you do, you don't even hand them your card. You just look at them and you say, I'm opting out of the camera. And then they will say, give me your ID and your boarding pass.
Okay, that's great advice. I didn't know that. So, okay.
Well, I'm opting out.
Senator Merkley in Oregon has just a snit over this. And he has been on social media just lambasting the TSA for forcing him to look in that camera. He is the Senate author of a traveler's privacy protection bill to get rid of those cameras. And in Washington, D.C., at National Airport is the only airport that I have seen a special little stop sign about this big. And on it says, if you're going to opt out, do not give us your driver's license first.
Now, what about when you come in? So if you have global entry, right? Mm-hmm. And can you opt out of, because it's all face scan on that thing too. Can you opt out of that or no?
No, I think the global entry, they have it. I think it's a completely different process. And if it doesn't say that you can opt out, you can't. However, there are other signs when you're going to go into the jetway, like for foreign or international travel. It will say, we send this photo to Customs and Border Patrol, and then da 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 da. And the last paragraph says, if you want to opt out, you can opt out, just tell the agent. But when you come from the foreign country, as far as I know, it's almost impossible for you to opt out because then you're on their soil.
Right. Okay. All right, Twila, appreciate you coming on. Thanks for the work you're doing over at the Citizens Council for Health Freedom, and thanks for helping educate everybody about the dangers of this Real ID.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, see you again soon. Come see us in Australia. Second show's added in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. We'll see you in Burbank, California, the day after Thanksgiving. It's a Friday. And then Pottstown, Pennsylvania, December 6th. Plus, January 11th, we're going to be in Waikiki at the Blue Note. Tickets not available yet for them, but go to jimmydore.com for a link for all the other tickets.